Hey, how's it going? So my name is Mike Carell. I'm Managing Director with Index Data. Tara Barnett, who's a library services analyst for us, is going to help. She'll sort of answer your questions when we get beyond my level of knowledge. We put this session together thinking that one of the challenges that libraries often have is when you move to a new folio version, like how are you sure that it's going to work out? And that can be sort of scary a little bit. And we've had some success, I think, in helping some of our customers manage that. And it's actually the process that we go through is sort of a derivative of the original migration process. So that's what we're going to talk about here. So challenges that we have when we move to a folio initially, it's a lot of work, lots of people involved, usually a fair amount of time involved, a lot of hours, people hours involved. So that's something to consider. And we want to make sure that when we actually do our go live event, so you have this year long, or depending on Library of Congress, 4 years long, or however long, it's a long time. And you finally get to that weekend when you're going to cut over, or that week when you're going to cut over, and you want it to just be smooth and trouble free. So that's one of our goals. And once we go live, so that's great. We get through that event and we survive, but then 6 months later or a year later, Folio comes out with a new version. We want to take advantage of that, so we have to upgrade, and so that the anxiety builds, and we have to deal with that. So these are some of the challenges, and what we're going to talk about is the processes that we have developed and work with our customers and partners on, how we handle that initial migration, and then how we can leverage some of that with you. And I have a joke sort of that I already forgot, but we want to make sure that our go live day is very boring. It's very pedestrian. It's ho-hum. No surprises, right? That's our goal during the initial migration. And then after we upgrade the stuff, we also want it to be kind of boring in a really good sense. So this is how we think about the overall migration process. So there's, and you can see the 4 graphics that I created with the circle that's supposed to be continuous in a couple circles. So it's an iterative process. So we're going to map data and load data. We're going to take several passes at it. Sometimes we're going to take a pass based on the type of data, like bibliographic or order data might be a different pass, and so forth. So we're going to do that. We're also going to be looking at workflow analysis. So what are the jobs that folks at the libraries have to complete, and how do they work, and what are the constraints there? And then inevitably there's some aspect of folio that doesn't work like your old system, or maybe doesn't work well enough for you automatically. And so we call those workarounds, when you have to deal with a gap between what folio does or how it does it and what your requirements are. So all of those things are happening simultaneously. And as I said, we'll cycle through during the implementation process, thinking about either different functional areas or different data sets. As we go through those, we are going to conduct what we refer to as acceptance testing. And I've got a slide next that talks, that gives some definitions here. But basically, acceptance testing is as deep and as wide as it needs to be to verify that the data migration plan that we established, the actual mappings, the way that we transform the data, it all works. So we're good. So we're going to accept the fact that, and also we're going to walk through our processes and make sure that we can, catalog or check things in and out, or whatever process we have. And then we're going to also document what we're doing. So we're going to sort of go through that those cycles. And when we're ready, then we're going to try a dry run. And when we do the dry run, how do we tell if the dry run went well? We're going to execute these things that we call essentials tests. So, and we're going to do that in a cycle. So let's just say hypothetically you have a year migration project. The first 6 months are probably going to be spent mostly in that left side where we're sort of mapping our data and making sure that our workflows are handled and so forth, making sure that we kind of sign off on, okay, yeah, we're done with the bibs and the holdings and so forth, or we're done with orders. And then as we get more things that are sort of behind that acceptance curve, then we're going to start running dry runs. And so the dry runs, you might run one sort of in the January timeframe, and then another maybe in March, and then maybe another one in April, and then the last one in May. And the goal would be the last one that you do is comes out really well, first of all, but also that you're not going to have to change anything between then and when you go live. So the same exact scripts and programs and processes and steps that you did on that last dry run is what happens when you go live. And that's why the go live becomes kind of boring, because you've already predicted it. For us, one of the key goals of the dry run is to get a timing sequence so that we know exactly how long the migration is going to take. So we know that if we want to shut operations off on Friday at 8 p.m. and we want to come back up on Folio on Monday morning at 8 a.m., we know that window of time, that 48-ish hours, that we can get everything done that we need to. So by doing several dry runs, that's how we gain that confidence that the window of time that we're allocating is actually going to work. So this is the standard migration process. And again, some of the definitions. So data mapping and loading, it's the sort of extract, transform, load process for all of our different data sets. And I've sort of described all this. The go live event is high fives and beer. So I know that we have some people that aren't from the US, so I don't want to use expressions that don't mean anything, but you know, high fives and beer is good, right? That's good. Okay. So this is our standard process. In working with several customers, and both large customers and smaller customers, one of the things that we've learned is that for a customer that has a very large collection, we recommend creating something that we call exemplars for a data set. And so if you think about using inventory data as an example, if you think about all the different types of metadata and material that you have, and then all of the different types of variances you might have. So you have records with many holdings. You have some records that have or users that have many loans or many checkouts and so forth. You take all of those different variations and you sort of put together an exemplar list. And what that allows you to do is basically you take a superset of all the different types of mappings that you're going to have to conduct, and you do those mappings and you test with a very small number of records. That's important. That's handy, because testing with a smaller number of records allows you to do it very quickly and do it very often. And so instead of slogging around 12 million records to see, did I get, the certain type of mapping done, you can slog 100 records instead. So we found that's a handy tip. We also like to take all of the analysis that we conduct with that to deal with Folio's workflows, with your library's workflows in Folio. That's a lot of work that's spent, and it's very valuable output. We want to take that output and use it for example, our essentials tests. So we've got lists of processes that we run in the libraries, and we've got notations about how we know that they're working well or not. And sort of we distill that down into what we've referred to as essentials tests. Those essentials tests then are also helpful when we're creating our training material. So you invest in understanding what our workflows are and what the workarounds might have to be and so forth. And that helps us lead to tests that will allow us to accept the work that we've done in the mappings and so forth. Also, a subset of those essentials tests that help us verify our dry runs. And then later we'll talk about how that also helps us with upgrades. And then you can also play that through as sort of material that you might leverage for training. So not necessarily the actual, some of the documentation for your workflow analysis, but also just the specific things that you think you might need to train on. And then, as I said, you want to do dry runs until it becomes boring. So now you're live, everything went well, we had our beer, we had our high fives, now it's 5 months later, there's a new version of Folio, and we want to take advantage of some functionality. So how are we going to handle that? Well, you don't have to worry so much about the data migration, the ETL stuff, because the Folio upgrade actually does that. So that's great. You don't have to do that yourselves, but by the actual act of upgrading from version A to version B will take all the data that used to be in your Folio system and move it, transform it as it needs to be in the new system. So that's great. But you do have new pieces of functionality in Folio that you have to account for. So you're going to need to plan for how we use this or how this might change the processes that we have going on. Also, functionality changes. So it doesn't work the way that it used to work, or it sort of works better, maybe. Some things are cleaned up or fixed. And then there's also, so that's functionality. We also have permissions changes. And sometimes the permissions changes come from new functionality, new modules or different modules. But sometimes it's just a different way or improved way of handling the permissions. So we have to take that into account too. So you can use your essentials tests and your exemplar set if you want. So not that you're loading the exemplar set, but now you can always refer to those. Again, let's just hypothetically say 100 records. So you can go check those in the new environment and verify that everything still looks good. So this is how we think about upgrades. So again, you invest all that time and energy into the migration itself, and then you sort of leverage whatever you can out of that. One of the things that we do is provide a permissions change sort of report every release for our customers. And so if you're not, how many people use index data in here? Okay, great. Thank you. And so if you're not using index data, I don't know, are there any EBSCO people in here? Do you guys know, do you guys provide a permissions report that's like the one I'm looking at? Okay, so we're happy to share. And so if anybody wants to get the list for each release, we can help with that. But this is, and Tara, maybe you can help me understand or help me describe the value of this and how long it takes for people to sort of go through this. Is this something that they focus on, or is this sort of only when there's a problem?
It should be something. Yeah, I mean, it's the permissions are challenged. So, Tara, can you talk to the regular people and
Hello. Hopefully it is something that people are focusing on because, permissions issues are extremely difficult to troubleshoot for our libraries. And so taking care of some of this in advance will hopefully prevent some of those issues. Is that fair? Okay.
Thank you. All right. Back over here. So I have a slide here that talks about examples, but actually it's probably better to just look at the document itself. And so we've gone through different, so our first customer migrated in 2019, I think. And so we've gone through a few different iterations of how to create these essentials tests, and we keep learning from the customers themselves. So we sort of present, hey, this is how we've done it in the past. And then they sort of noodle around and think about what would work for them. And then they come up with a process. And then we're like, that's great. We're going to use that for others going forward, which is what we've done with this. So this list is a derivative of something that Holy Cross came up with. Go ahead.
So this might, I don't even know if this is like how far of a derivative this is from Holy Cross, but they came up with this amazing set of essentials tests that works really well for them every time. They always catch issues that no one else catches. And I think that the reason it works so well is that it's asking people to go in and do things sort of holistically. So other libraries have used something similar, but I'm not sure how far they actually derive it because it's actually pretty generic.
Thank you. But I think it's helpful to see sort of the specific examples. And as Tara said, it can be, very general. Check that the LDB app and LDB server are working as expected. I mean, that's not very detailed, so you kind of have to know what you're looking for. When we first started, we actually took all of the tests from BugFest out of test rails. And we use those as sort of the starting point. And when we were working with Chicago, one of their groups looked at that and said, when I mean groups, I mean, tech services or resource access or some of the other, divisions within the library. One of the groups looked at that and said, this is great, we can work from this. And one of the groups looked at that and said, we're not working from that at all. They're going to start from scratch. And so it is really, it's whatever your people are comfortable with in terms of running through it. But, just covers all the functional areas and sort of it's at the level of detail that is appropriate and comfortable for you and your institution. It's a rigor, I think, that is worth investing in. Again, going back to that, if you've done that for your boy, that was a quick session. If you've done that for your migration, then it's not much added effort to leverage it for your upgrades. All right, so I have a couple of other points here about the essentials test. So again, it's not a one size fits all. So some institutions are going to be very detailed and maybe have a longer list, and some will be a little bit more simplistic and brief. I think whatever works. We have had customers who, like I said, some resource access wanted a spreadsheet, and tech services wanted a Word document because that felt better, and they wanted to check things off and assign and be able to sort and so forth. So that's fine. You need to review them obviously every release. So there's new functionality. You want to make sure that you account for that in future releases. And there may also be some functionality that you stop using or gets deprecated. Another interesting dilemma comes up if you're running through your essentials test and everything works great, no problem. But if something fails, what do you do? And so we've had, as Tara mentioned, essentials tests actually trigger bugs that we log into the FOLIO community. But sometimes it can be sort of a weird permutation of data that we can explain, and so it's not really a problem and so forth. But the point is, it's there to help us from running into something that's going to be less than desirable when we go live. So for us, speaking for index data, and I think EBSCO has a similar setup, but we can hear from them. Customers have a test environment as well as a production environment. And so when we are going through a migration, we will take their production environment and then clone it to their test environment. So at that particular moment, production and test are identical. And then we upgrade the test environment from, let's say, Nolana to Orchid. And so they have a test environment that's in Orchid, and they have a production environment that's, and comes before or after. Anyway, they're different. And the idea is when they go through their essentials tests and other kinds of things in their test environment, then once they say that feels good, then we're going to do exactly the same process of upgrading to the production environment. So we started with two identical systems, right? And then we upgraded and verified, and now we're going to perform exactly the same upgrade in the production environment. We usually let customers pick sort of a window of time for them to go from their we upgrade your test environment to we're going to upgrade your production environment. But there are some times where we put we put suggestions in front of them, or maybe even highly urge them to make some changes in certain windows. We don't want to have it becomes kind of a pain from a hosting perspective if you have, for example, 12 customers on 12 different versions of FOLIO. So we don't really want that. So we're trying to urge people in similar versions. Also, the community only maintains the last version and sometimes the one previous to that. And so we want people to be fresh, but we definitely have customers who skip releases. And so that's something that we work with individual customers on as in terms of, does this bring like a lot of additional value? Is it coming at a time of the year where it's convenient or inconvenient for you? And so we're pretty flexible in that way. But generally, after someone gets their test environment upgraded to a new version, it's usually within a month that they're going to go live. So I don't know what the fastest has been. About 2 weeks. So we've had it as fast as sort of a 2-week turnaround. All right. That is I'm trying to get everybody out of here so they can go rest after their first day. But that's the presentation. That's the information. I'm happy to answer any questions. Tara here has worked directly with customers, and she may have things that she wants to add before you get to questions.
Yes, I do. I just wanted to walk to the microphone.
And then add that, of course, the last step after we upgrade any customer is that we ask them to test their production environment the same way they tested their test environment, just in case anything was different. And every once in a while, we do find something. So.
True. Thank you. And then last bit is we will also, after we're done upgrading both your test and production, you guys run through your tests and production looks good. You're in production for a day or two-ish. We'll typically clone the production onto test again, so that you get, again, sort of in the same state right after we go live with that version. So love to take any questions. Yes, sir.
Do your customers always have access to the test environment?
Yes. Yes, all of our customers have access to a test environment. We have some customers who actually have more than the test and production, and then some other environments as well. We take that on a case-by-case basis.
When you mentioned, Sarah, that even after you've switched them over to production, they'd still test again. How long between when they're on production and they're testing again, and when they're like, okay, this is proper go live, or does that not exist and you assume they're still live and they're just testing around to check?
Yeah, so Julie asked how soon after we have someone upgraded and they're live on a new environment, how long after testing do we consider them like for real live? We assume that nothing's going to go wrong. So far, I don't think anything has. So, but it's still important to test.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. They're live. I mean, when we make this, yeah, exactly. They're live in production, and so they're rolling. Yep.
The essentials testing information, are those automated or manual, or can they be?
We don't have any automated tests as part of essentials tests. This is really things that librarians are going to do in their environment. Yeah. That is a really good question. Fiscal year rollover has been super smooth for us. No, I'm joking. It hasn't. It's a nightmare usually. And what we've seen, and I'll let you speak as well. But we've seen, depending on the way that you lay out your fiscal, your budgets and your finances and so forth, how many funds you have and how many, all this kind of stuff definitely impacts how smoothly and easily fiscal year rollover happens. We have worked with, for some customers, we sort of commandeered their test environment to verify fiscal year rollover. For other customers, we've actually created a separate environment to test fiscal year rollover. We're planning, because we had, specifically with Chicago, we had a real nightmare trying to get them to roll over correctly. We are planning on testing fiscal year rollover when Poppy comes out. So, which is, 8 months from when Chicago is going to have to need it. But we just don't want to get into that situation where, oh my goodness, this is getting really, really close to the true deadline of when it's going to start hurting the university. That's a good question. So most customers end up migrating at their fiscal year boundary. So they close their fiscal year in their old system and everything starts new in FOLIO. We have had a couple of customers that have migrated mid-year, and I don't remember any problems with them doing that. And I'm going to admit that I don't remember any of the precautions or implications that were part of that, but I know that it worked. But as a practical, I mean, there were, in those instances, there were sort of external factors that forced that timing. I think most people would try to do the transfer at the fiscal year boundary.
First of all, the committee had a question in the chat.
Thank you.
Oh.
Oh.
So then I'll ask my question. You can repeat it. Couple of questions. So you're talking about migration and upgrade. To what extent are those the same process? Are those two different things, or is it really you're doing the same steps to migrate from a different system into FOLIO versus migrate from one version of FOLIO to another?
Yeah, so one of the things I'm trying to emphasize here is that there's a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
So repeat the question. So to what extent is the migration process, the original migration and the upgrade, to what extent are they the same or they're different? That's the question I'm going to answer. And the first part that I'm showing here is really sort of the analysis of how do we get our data and our workflows from our old system to the new system. That's no longer applicable in an upgrade. But the concept of a dry run and essentials test is exactly the same. The idea with the dry run is we're going to move our stuff, our data into your new system, and your system's going to be clean and ready for you to look at. And then the essentials tests let you verify that. Same exact thing with an upgrade. We're going to take your system and we're going to upgrade it. And so now it's fresh on the new version. And now you can go test it and verify that everything works.
So when you're doing migration, you're setting up a whole new server, a whole new tenant on the new version, and then extracting your data and moving your data.
For an upgrade, no, the process is we are going to clone your production data into test. And so the data is all there. And then the upgrade process of FOLIO actually makes any data changes that are necessary. That's part of the upgrade process. We don't have to do anything external. Modules, that's one of the early lessons that we learned in the FOLIO project is if you don't do that, you're in really bad shape. So the modules, as part of the upgrade process, they add new columns or whatever they need to do to the database or whatever else and transform stuff. And they do all that stuff as part of the upgrade. So by the time we run the upgrade, the system is ready for people.
So my other question is, I don't know, this may not be something you guys had anything had looked at all, but I'm wondering about how migration is expected to work in the situation of the enhanced the social support setup, where you've got multiple tenants in a single central office tenant. Would each of those tenants be a separate migration process, or is it one giant thing, or how is that expected to work?
So the question is, when we get the extended consortial support, how will upgrades work? I don't know enough about that work yet. I don't know if anybody here does to know. But sort of if I fall back on what I said a few minutes ago, the software is supposed to take care of the upgrades and any data machinations that need to happen. And so hopefully that's taken into account.
Okay.
Yeah, so the question is, can a customer skip a release? Can they go from Orchid to Quesanella or whatever, skip any release? Yes, we have had a number of customers do that.
Well, we have had a number of customers do that, and from the customer's perspective, it's a skip. But from our perspective, don't we upgrade them to the? Yeah,
I mean, we actually have to go from one release to the next. But we just don't. So it's basically we go from, I'm terrible with these names. We go from Lotus to Morning Glory, or we go from Morning Glory to Nolana, and then we go from Nolana to Orchid. And you think we went from Lotus to Orchid. But because of the software having to take care of all the data changes, that's why we had to go through each one to make sure that it worked. and we do cursory checks in between, but it's nothing like verifying yourselves that everything worked well.
When production is going into test, are there any steps to not allow, say, scheduled emails to go out from the test environment?
Yeah, we do. We have a lot of things that are in place that guard against emails, for example, going out to patrons or other things that, that are consistent with having a test environment, not a non-production environment. And it's we use mechanisms, everything from some of our email infrastructure whitelisting kind of mechanisms, as well as even in some instances modifying the data on the way into the test environment, changing email addresses, kind of stuff.
What's your experience according to the number of doing test case? Do you do this once a time, twice a time, or how often do you do this?
So for the question is, I think for when we're upgrading a customer to a new release, how often do we have to basically upgrade them, clone them from production to test, and then upgrade, and how long? I don't know that we've done it more than once. Do you remember us doing it more than once? Maybe once. It's not very common. If we have to do the upgrade more than once, it's not very common. But the potential. I mean, having just said that, we have caught bugs, and so that's a time where maybe because the bug was, the type of bug that it was afterwards fixed, we have to redo it.
You asked a question about automating some of the tests, right? When we upgrade FOLIO, one of the things we run into is testing the apps that integrate with FOLIO. So our discovery layer, for example. I wrote some automated testing for our discovery layer for viewfinds, specifically for our customizations. We can make sure our, the product out of the box never has a problem with the upgrades, but our customization plan broke. So to regression test those. And I'm just thinking along the same lines of, would it be worth spending any time writing automated tests for the FOLIO UI itself? But what's the point of that? TestRail is going to already have caught many of those. So I'm wondering what the subset of problems that actually shows up most often that are caught by the sorts of manual testing that's done in each effort. Maybe there's a subset that's actually worth automating. Maybe.
Yeah. So did the online people get enough of that comment / question? Or should I try to summarize?
Sorry.
Okay, summarize. So we asked a question earlier in the session was, are any of the tests automated? And the answer was no. But Lehigh has actually written some automation for their customizations of viewfind, because obviously, they're responsible for that software. And if something broke during the migration, the upgrade, they would be on the hook to kind of fix that, and they want to understand that. So they built the customizations and they built the automation. Awesome. So sort of an open question though is, are there other instances where automation actually would be pretty helpful, and what things have been caught in an upgrade? So then maybe you take that as the sample to go back and look at what we should automate. My experience has been most of the time that we come up with some sort of problem that late in a release, it's usually some sort of weird combination of data and or the way that the function is used, which means automating that's hard. It's hard. But you're right though. I think the other thing that Maccabee said is there's already been a lot of investment in the test rails and the bug test rails, but also the automation of the software. And so hopefully they're catching a lot of things there. Yes, sir. Do our test environments have the same resources as our production environments? They don't. They don't. We're not doing any performance or load testing in the test environment. And so it's all functional, but they're not scaled to handle the production volume. as the production environments are. Do we usually test scaling for a new customer? We don't, typically, because we have customers that are about as large as, I mean, they're not Library of Congress large, but they're about as large as are adopting Folio. And so we have a good sense for what that takes from a resource standpoint. And we also have much smaller customers. So we feel like we have a nice range. And so we don't feel like performance is really something that we worry about. And we've also become pretty adept at monitoring and adjusting based on load and other things. So we feel pretty good about that. Someone is trying to contact me because my pocket keeps buzzing. Not that you guys needed to know that, sorry. Talk to the mic. So we're happy to share. As I said earlier, you know, whether you're an index data customer or not, we're you know, stewards of the community, and so we're happy to share stuff and processes. So feel free to reach out anytime. We'll hang out and answer any more questions that pop up, but this was the session. All right, thank you. And make sure people catch air conditioning on tomorrow and Thursday, right? It's going to be hot. Okay. So thanks, folks online. People are starting to disperse. So thank you.